Croatia's coast may look like a dream today, calm, clear, and full of life, but behind the beauty are scars. Dubrovnik endured 8 months of shelling, and across these hills and harbors, Canadian peacekeepers stood watch. Today, people come to visit Croatia for the views and the TV fame, but they often miss the real story: the war, the resilience, the quiet courage.
We're sharing our Croatia travel video not just for the beaches or the wine, although they're amazing, but for the memory, because this coastline wasn't always calm, and Canada had a role to play in helping it get here.
Welcome to Wandering Wednesdays, where we share powerful travel stories that go deeper than just a postcard.
We moved this series from Tuesdays because, let's be honest, after our Sunday news drops, we all need a bit of breathing space, right?
So today, we're sailing the Dalmatian Coast, tracing a route we took this time last year. From Dubrovnik to Korčula, with detours into wartime history and hidden tunnels.
If you're looking for alternatives to traveling to the USA, the Dalmatian Coast is one of the top places that we can recommend. You can't go to Croatia without visiting Dubrovnik. It's one of the most photographed cities in the world. But what most people don't realize is that not long ago, this place was under siege.
In 1991, during the Croatian War of Independence, Yugoslav and Serbian forces attacked Dubrovnik, despite it having no military value. The goal? Destroy morale and erase identity and target history.
Over 2,000 shells hit the old town. 2/3 of the buildings were damaged. Cultural sites, libraries, even churches were bombed.
There's a calm here now, but it wasn't always like this. These streets once echoed with air raid sirens. Today, they echo with footsteps from cruise ship crowds.
And that's the contrast that hits you the most. Dubrovnik is alive, vibrant, and packed with people, but it's carrying a memory most visitors will never notice.
And then came Game of Thrones. Dubrovnik doubled as King's Landing, and tourism exploded. The city saw a 500% spike in visitors. Cruise ships, walking tours, merchandise is everywhere. Tourists flood the walls that were once hiding spots. They pose on staircases made famous by Game of Thrones, not realizing those same steps were once covered in rubble.
We get it, and we were huge Game of Thrones fans. I admit, I walked on those steps yelling, "Shame, shame," myself, but it's also surreal. You're walking through a fantasy world built on real blood and resilience, and that's why we always recommend stepping beyond the selfie spots.
Dubrovnik rebuilt itself fast. The UNESCO World Heritage team led the restoration using original materials, and the result is stunning. But the scars are still here if you know where to look.
For Canadians, this is where the story begins. Not because they vacationed here, but because our peacekeepers under the blue UN helmets served just inland, trying to hold the fragile peace together.
In 1991, Yugoslav and Serb forces began shelling Dubrovnik in a siege that lasted nearly 9 months. Relentless bombing hit this UNESCO World Heritage city, and it was an attack not just on people, but on culture itself.
While Croatia rebuilt fast, not everything is cosmetic. You'll still see bullet holes in the walls, and if you know where to look, you'll feel the weight of the stories that locals tell.
While tourists stayed on the coast, Canada's peacekeepers were sent inland, into the villages, valleys, and conflict zones most visitors will never see.
From 1992 to 1995, over 40,000 Canadian troops were deployed to the Balkans under a UN mission called Operation Harmony, and its mandate was simple: protect civilians and hold ceasefires.
But the reality? Far from peaceful. In places like Perak, Canadian troops were often under fire from all sides. They weren't there to win, they were there to stand between.
And then came Medak Pocket, one of the most significant yet least known chapters in Canadian military history.
In 1993, Canadian troops were stationed in a Serb-controlled area of Croatia. A ceasefire was in place until Croatian forces launched a sudden offensive to push the Serbs out. The result was absolute chaos.
What was supposed to be a handover turned into a confrontation. The Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry found themselves caught in a gunfight. defending civilians while trying not to escalate the violence.
They held their ground. They documented evidence of war crimes, and they prevented what could have been an even greater massacre.
Canada didn't get much credit. The government barely acknowledged it, but the soldiers who were there, they'll never forget, and neither should we.
This is part of the story too. Not just beach bars and boat days, but bravery, diplomacy, and standing up for something that's bigger. If it's your first time in Dubrovnik, start with the city walls. They're nearly 2 kilometers long and give you the best perspective of the city and the coastline.
The walk is breathtaking. You pass by restored towers, cannon placements, and even the terracotta rooftops of the old town that had to be completely restored after the war. Take your time and stop for some refreshments and look out over the city and the coast and just imagine what they endured here. The city walls are not accessible, but if you have mobility issues, you can take the cable car for extraordinary views as well.
Next stop, Fort Lovrenac, known to Game of Thrones fans as the Red Keep. But in real life, it was a key defense post built centuries before HBO came calling.
You'll also want to check out the War Photo Limited Gallery. It's just outside of the main stretch, and it's a powerful photo exhibit. Brutal, honest, and a must-see if you want to understand this region.
When you need a break from the heat, and you will, head down to Buza Bar. You'll literally climb through a hole in the wall and find yourself perched on cliffs, sipping a cold drink while watching cliff jumpers launch into the Adriatic. There's something sacred about walking through a city that almost didn't make it. Dubrovnik is more than a postcard. It's a promise that with time, care, and community, even the most damaged places can come back.
While we explored the old town, we stayed just outside of the city center at Hotel Dubrovnik Palace. And it was perfect. It's tucked into the cliffs overlooking the sea, and the city bus stops right at the front door, taking you straight to the old town in only 10 minutes.
The hotel has a spa, indoor and outdoor pools, a romantic restaurant, and seriously impressive view from every balcony. And if you're planning to see a lot, just grab yourself a Dubrovnik pass. It covers public transit, the city walls, and most attractions.
Korčula might be the birthplace of Marco Polo, but in the 90s, it became a different kind of frontier, a quiet island caught in a loud war. Locals ferried supplies, hosted refugees, and held their ground.
Korčula feels like it was built for postcards. It has this feeling of a little bit of Venice, but its beauty runs deeper than the architecture. This island knows a thing or two about survival.
During the war, Korčula sheltered refugees fleeing the mainland. While the fighting never reached the island directly, the fear and tension were always present.
And even though there wasn't heavy shelling here, the economy was shattered. Tourism stopped, resources dried up, and people had to rebuild with almost nothing.
But they never stopped making wine. That's the Croatian spirit. One glass keeps the roots alive, no matter what the world throws at you.
Wander the town and you'll find medieval walls, Venetian flair, and a strong claim that Marco Polo was born here. Is it true? Well, we don't know, but we'll let the historians fight that one out. Stari Grad on Hvar is one of the oldest towns in Europe. It survived Roman rule, Venetian trade wars, and the breakup of Yugoslavia. And today, it's quietly thriving.
If Dubrovnik is a stage, Stari Grad is a whisper. You stroll past ruins and vineyards, and suddenly you're in a family-run canoba, eating seafood risotto under the stars. No rush, no schedule, just being alive.
Here's what we loved. No massive crowds, no large cruise ships, just narrow lanes, fresh seafood, and an atmosphere that feels like Croatia's soul is still intact.
Travelers often ask us where they should go outside of Dubrovnik, and our answer is right here. Stari Grad and Korčula are quieter, more local, and just as beautiful with a fraction of the foot traffic.
They're not just escapes, they're examples of what it means to rebuild slowly, intentionally, and beautifully.
We sailed the Dalmatian coast with Yacht Getaways, and honestly, it was the perfect way to explore the places most people miss. We sailed with them in Greece as well, and you can check the video out right here or in the links below. By sailing, we were allowed to stop in little nooks and hidden beaches, quiet harbors, and we had private snorkeling and swimming.
And that's the beauty of this trip. You don't just see the highlights, you discover the forgotten corners. From tiny fishing villages to Cold War relics, Yacht Getaways gave us a front row access to the real rugged Croatia.
During this cruise, we visited one of the most fascinating spots of all, a submarine tunnel carved straight into the cliffs. This might look something out of a spy movie, but these are real. Camouflaged submarine tunnels carved into Croatia's coastline during the Yugoslav era.
From above, it just looks like a rock, but inside, it's a relic from the Cold War, built to hide naval ships from NATO surveillance.
These tunnels were designed for fast launches and silent retreats. They're completely hidden from the sea, reinforced and built for stealth.
Standing in here, you can really feel the paranoia of the time, the tension between east and west, and how close this region was to exploding.
But it wasn't just tunnels. Along the coast, you'll find fortresses, gun batteries, and military ruins tucked behind hiking trails or cliffs that most visitors never notice.
And that's what's so wild about Croatia. It wears its beauty like armor, but underneath it's a landscape full of old scars and secret bunkers.
One minute you're exploring a hidden submarine base, and the next you're sailing into a vineyard-lined island with fresh seafood and local wine. That's Croatia.
And then there's Trogir, a living museum. Every single stone tells a story. Every alley has seen centuries, but even here, in a town that looks untouched, there was tension during the war.
It wasn't bombed like Dubrovnik, but people here felt the fear. They felt the anxiety and the uncertainty, and yet it endured.
That's the thread across all of these places. Islands, towns, coastlines. They didn't all take the same hit, but they all came back stronger, and they all have something to teach us.
When you sail away from the mainland, you start to feel it. The shift, the noise of history fades, and what replaces it is stillness.
During the war, islands like Mjet and the Elaphiti chain became places of refuge, not just physically, but emotionally. These were safe harbors when the mainland felt like it was falling apart.
Mjet is protected land. There's pine forests, saltwater lakes, and hiking and cycling trails. It's one of the quietest places in Croatia.
If you need to unplug, this is the place. You can swim in the lakes, rent a bike, hike through the woods, and make sure to visit the chapel on an island. It's like Croatia's nature pressed the reset button.
The Elaphiti Islands are just off the coast of Dubrovnik, but they feel a world away. No cars, no noise, just olive groves, stone houses, and time slowing down.
Then you hit the Paklini Islands just off Hvar, and everything changes. These aren't quiet refuges, these are party islands.
It's easy to forget that these places were part of a country in conflict not so long ago. But even here, where the wine flows and the music plays, there's a sense of freedom earned.
That's what makes Croatia so unique. It doesn't erase its past, it builds joy on top of it. You know that we've been talking a lot about what it means to be Canadian right now.
So why not look the part?
We've got t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, tote bags, and of course, our signature lines like Never 51 and On the A-Team. You can check it out in the description and in the pinned comment. Wear it proud and wear it loud. Let's talk numbers, because Croatia is gorgeous, but it's no longer a budget destination. Prices have skyrocketed in the past few years, especially in hotspots like Dubrovnik and Hvar.
We sailed with Yacht Getaways, and honestly, for what you get, it's one of the best deals left. 7 days sailing the Dalmatian coast, breakfast, lunch, and 2 dinners are included. Your wine and beer and cocktails. You have your own private host making your meals and telling you all about the islands, and your own private captain. We all had private cabins with private baths and these start around €1,900 per person depending on the cabin and season. It includes snorkeling every day, paddleboarding. You park right in the heart of the town so you are free to explore on foot and you have zero stress with maximum views.
And no, this isn't sponsored. We just loved the experience. And if you want to see multiple islands, eat fresh seafood, and skip the crowded ferries, then this is the way to go.
But if you want to go on your own, let's break down some of the prices.
Here's a quick breakdown of what to budget for a week in Croatia.
Mid-range hotels run around €120 to €180 a night. Luxury resorts, closer to €300 and up to €600 and up.
Street food is a bargain, 10 to 15 euros a day. A nice sit-down meal with wine, I'd plan for about 30 to 60 euros per person, and tasting menus can easily hit more than 100 euros.
Getting around by ferry is cheap. You can go from 8 to 30 euro, but private boat transfers or day charters can cost 100 euro to 250.
If you're heading inland, rental cars are about 50 euros a day plus fuel.
Tours and activities vary, so think about 20 euro to 40 euro for a city walking tour, or 25 to 80 for a wine tasting, and 50 to 120 euros for a kayaking or a sailing excursion.
So yes, Croatia is not dirt cheap anymore, but it's still worth every single cent.
Croatia isn't just a destination, it's a history lesson, and how places can come back from the brink, how they can carry memory without being defined by it, and how beauty can grow out of devastation.
We came to Croatia not just to relax, but to understand. And we hope that when you come here, you'll do the same. Go beyond the beaches, ask questions, listen to stories, and travel with purpose.
If you've served in the Balkans or you have family or friends who did, we'd love to hear your story in the comments. Canada's role here isn't talked about enough, and we're proud to shine a light on it.
And if this inspired you to explore Croatia with new eyes, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who thinks Europe just means Paris or Rome.
This is Wandering Wednesdays, where we travel with memory and tell stories behind the places you've always dreamed about.